Everybody, Bryan Alvarez here on Wrestling Observer Live. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sundays, 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern, Saturday mornings with Jim Valley, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern, Sundays with Andrew Zarian. And it's Monday here on the show, and you know what that means. We got a lot to talk about. It was a very, very busy weekend. We had a lot of shows. We had the WWE Backlash pay-per-view, and man, we had a UFC and a New Japan show and SmackDown. There was a Thursday Collision, which we talked about. Raw is tonight. NXT is tomorrow. And we got all of that to go over. But, obviously today, we have to talk about the passing of Sabu. Passed away this past weekend at the age of 60. And we're going to talk about him on the show here today. Tomorrow, Lance Storm is going to join us on the program, and he has a lot to say about Sabu, so we'll be talking more about him tomorrow. And going to give some of my thoughts and such, and also, we are going to hear from you. So if you have favorite memories of Sabu, you're welcome to send them to me via email. It is brian@wrestlingobserver.com. That is brian@wrestlingobserver.com. Put Sabu in the subject line. I sent this out on Twitter and Blue Sky, and I've gotten a lot so far. Got a whole bunch of retweets, but not as many actual emails. I know you guys have Sabu memories, so if you have good ones, particularly the times you might have interacted with him, those would be great as well. Please send those to me, Brian@wrestlingobserver.com. Put Sabu in the subject line, and we're going to read a bunch of those here today. You're welcome in Texas as well. Email is preferred for the Sabu stories, but the text message line 425-780-7566. I'm F4W Online, Threads, Instagram, and Cameo. At Bryan Alvarez, X and Blue Sky. Back in a moment. Observer Live. Just a quick note before this free video. If you click like and subscribe, I'd be very thankful.
I am going to channel the well-known, infamous roast of Bryan and Lance.
Oh, my God.
I vaguely remember this.
Lance was a champion in virtually every company he has appeared in. While he did hold the distinction of holding 3 titles, that angle fizzled out faster than his podcast, Killing the Town.
Wow. I now remember this utter disaster of a roast.
Let's get Lance a chair to sit in. And as we do, could we also bring someone up here to show him how to use it? I remember that chair shot. I don't remember who it was on, but
utter silence that this roast was met with.
Tom, at least I was smart enough not to do those chair shots again.
Bryan, besides me, there are others who I'm sure dislike you, like Vince Russo, Eric Bischoff, but I think you're great, like a guiding light or a father, which is why I'm not surprised when you screw me every week. The best-selling author of The Death of WCW. He had just completed his new book, for which actually Lance Storm wrote the foreword, which is 3 more than most wrestling fans know.
Hideous. Atrocious.
It must be hard when you look so young. If I didn't know better, I'd say you had your grandma's genes. But actually, if the camera panned down, I bet Lance is wearing them. Anyways, let's start the show. Carmelo went for the La Mystica. Andrade went for the Message.
It's actually not the La Mystica. It starts like a La Mystica, but the La Mystica is actually a submission, and he doesn't land in the submission. He just does the whole slam part and then jumps up.
Yeah, the La Mystica is a tilt-a-whirl head scissor into a Fujiwara armbar.
Into a Fujiwara armbar. The La Mystica is not the submission. Do not tell me
I didn't say that was a submission. I said the La Mystica involves the tilt-a-whirl facebuster into the submission. The whole thing. Why are you so angry?
Well, you just changed what you said live, right?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't land in a submission. He just slams them. So it's not a La Mystica.
I believe that's the actual move.
Okay,
but
whatever. Who cares?
I just hope editor Sean pulls up the exact clip of you saying Lemistica is a submission and then denying it afterwards.
Lemistic is actually a submission. I didn't say that was a submission.
Lemistic is actually a submission? I didn't say that was a submission.
Editor Sean.
Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Going solo here today, but you're welcome to send your emails about Sabu to me here. Bryan at WrestlingObserver.com, F4WOnline at gmail.com, any of them work. Sabu in the subject line. We're going to read some here today. But wanted to say a few things. I was at Sabu's last match, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. It kind of ties into everything, but I think the first thing that I want to say is that I think that Sabu should be in pretty much every wrestling Hall of Fame. And after he passed away, you know, all the wrestlers were doing their tributes and everything like that, and Sami Zayn, of all people, he noted that like months ago, and he actually retweeted it, he mentioned that he had been advocating for Sabu to go into the WWE Hall of Fame. And, of course, he was advocating it again after he passed away. And the thing, obviously, he should be in the WWE Hall of Fame because there's not really requirements to being in the WWE Hall of Fame. But I'm talking in the Observer Hall of Fame where there's a large panel of like 100 wrestlers and historians and et cetera that vote. And I think that he is a Hall of Famer. And in fact, dating back decades, when Dave would send out those ballots for the Hall of Fame, I can remember early 2000s, I would vote for Sabu. And I don't want to say that I was ridiculed, but I often had people questioning, like, why did you vote for Sabu? And the thing to me about Sabu is, obviously, professional wrestling is a work. It's not real. And so when you're looking at, like, who should go into the Hall of Fame, well, there's a lot of different reasons you can vote for somebody. If it's somebody like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, we're talking like all-time Hulk Hogan, Bruno Sammartino, obviously they need to go into the Hall of Fame. Sometimes, you know, you look at, oh, well, you know, this person didn't win such and such a world title in a national promotion. It's like, well, yeah, there's something to when you're given the belt, it's pretend, but they gave it to you for a reason. They thought that you could carry the company, draw money, etc. There's something to that. But at the end of the day, you didn't really win anything. So I always look at things like, and one of the big things I look at, actually I would say one of the biggest actually, beyond just like, are you a no-brainer that should go into the Hall of Fame, I always look at influence. I very much am into influence because at the end of the day, if you were somebody and maybe you weren't a WWE champion, maybe you weren't whatever, but you were somebody that influenced tons and tons of people, and you were somebody that in some ways, in many ways, helped to change the business, then especially over a long period of time, you know, that to me, you're a Hall of Famer. And it's one of these things I didn't even think about until today. But I always think about myself. Well, who influenced me? And you know, you watch my matches and you can see, you know, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. These were the guys. Ric Flair. I watched them. I loved their matches, and it was like, man, I want to steal that, and I want to steal that. Not politically correct, but stole a lot from Chris Benoit, chops, and this and that. But I had forgotten that before I did like regular independence and we had our YWF, our backyard promotion, I half wore a Sabu outfit. I thought that Sabu's outfit was so cool. It was different. Back then, it was I watched a lot of WWF and WCW, and everybody had their tights and everything like that, unless you were like a garbage man. But he had the cool pants and the whole shebang. And so I wore a pair of gi pants, and I wrestled in gi pants, and we did a match, and I was like, I'm doing this Sabu moonsault. And we set up a table, and I did the moonsault off like the awards podium, and I put this dude through a table, and man, I loved it. And I thought, like, I wasn't in at that point, I wasn't going to be doing like juicing and barbed wire, everything like that, but I thought that I thought his gimmick was cool. I thought his outfit was cool. I thought his just the basic stuff, moonsault through the table. And that was just me. And then you look at everybody else. Sabu's last match, Joey Janela came out, or actually, he did the match and everything. And then the match is over, and Sabu won. And then Joey Janela just got up, and he did this promo, and he just said, Sabu, he is my favorite wrestler of all time. He's the greatest wrestler ever. He's the reason I'm in this business. And, there's so many guys that were influenced by Sabu. And you can look in any promotion today. You watched a barbed wire match, you watch a match with thumbtacks, you watch whatever. And obviously these things were being done around the world, before Sabu got into it. But there were so many wrestlers that grew up watching Sabu in ECW, and they watched barbed wire matches, and they watched this dude going through tables, and they watched this dude get his biceps sliced up and starts taping it back up because he's got a 12-inch gash. See this guy breaking his neck, something goes wrong, he comes back in a neck brace, the moonsaults, the table bumps. I mean, dude, you can watch a WWE pay-per-view this weekend. It doesn't matter what gimmick you bring into the ring, they'd rather see somebody go through a table. And who in this country popularized going through tables? It was Sabu. And I've always looked at the influence he has had on this business. I remember, when I started working for Tim Flowers in ICW, I had this guy, and his name was Awesome Adam. This was like 1999, 2000. And I don't remember what his real name is, but everybody called him Fabu because he was a total Sabu clone. He had the same pants. He had the same hair. They would do their spots off the balconies. It was always the main event. The people would eat it up. They loved it. I mean, all of the hardcore stuff that we see to this day, I mean, Sabu was one of the pivotal people in this country responsible for that. And it's funny because when you think about the very early days of his career, I mean, he was trained by his uncle, the Sheik, but he was not trained to be Sabu or the Sheik. He was trained in technical wrestling. And somebody put a video up on Twitter. It was just a short video, but it was from the 80s, and it was Sabu in there in regular gear as a regular guy, and he's doing spots. He's wrestling with, of all people, Richie Magnet, who was one of my best friends when we wrestled. Richie Magnet, him and his wife Tammy, they lived in Vancouver, Washington, best friends with Buddy, and we did countless shows together. And, I'd always heard, because at this point, Richie was a big dude, but I'd always heard, man, when he was young, he was like lean. He was a Polynesian light heavyweight champion, I was always told. And he was a great worker. And all of a sudden, I see this video after Sabu passed away. There's Sabu and Richie Magnet in Polynesian pro wrestling. And man, the work in like the 30 seconds or a minute of this video, I was like, oh my God. So he was trained to be a wrestler. He could wrestle, but obviously he made his name. He worked all over the place, but, went to Japan, started doing all the hardcore matches in Japan. The majority of his scars came from matches he had in Japan. There was barbed wire, there was fire, Onita, Sheik, ends up going to ECW. Actually, not even through Paul Heyman. I think it was through Todd Gordon. And he ends up getting hooked up at ECW, and, one of the biggest stars in all of ECW at a time where ECW influenced WWF and WCW. I mean, there's a reason we had a Monday Night War and an Attitude Era. It was all because of ECW. And, he had appearances in WCW. He had appearances in WWE twice, including the ECW rebrand. It was never like the ECW Sabu. It was always like a watered-down version of it. But he was still Sabu. So more about this after the break. Observer Live.
You're clear.
Just a quick note before this free video. If you click like and subscribe, I'd be very thankful. We got a big Elimination Chamber report here. And also Collision from Saturday, which actually was a pretty damn good show in its own right.
I was not told to watch Collision.
Vinny?
I forgot to text him Thursday night. I figured he'd be in bed. I said I'd do it tomorrow. And then Friday I bought a car. I was busy, and I've been forgotten. John comes out, looks into the camera, and says, "There's a vibe in here tonight."
Sure is.
I'll see. Punk's eyes are bugging out of his head. Seth is still there screaming, "Die, die!" And Seth gets his way. Punk dies. John Cena wins. I thought the finish of this was incredible. Great stuff.
God, Travis Scott. Jesus God almighty. This was exactly like when Hogan used to come to the ring, Dennis Rodman trailing him, and Dennis Rodman was like on another planet. He had no idea where he was at, stumbling to the ring. You basically have to drag him down there. This Travis Scott was on another planet, dude.
Well, the first time he was on the show was on that Raw show. He was smoking a blunt in the audience.
They go from the hug to a shot of Cena's angry heel face, and they cut right to Rock On. And then he kicks him right in the balls. And the crowd freaked out. The John Cena turned heel. Hulk Hogan, he was getting booed before he turned. It was a risk, but, they were getting sick of the guy anyway. The problem with Steve Austin was he was the top babyface, and there was nobody to replace him when he turned. John Cena's been gone forever. He comes back. It's not like he was going to be the top babyface. They got 50 babyfaces. Cody's the biggest babyface they got. There's no risk whatsoever turning John Cena heel. He's 10 times more interesting now. The Cena and Cody feud is 1,000 times more interesting.
Travis hit Cody Rhodes in the face as hard as he could. I bet that sucked.
This was a big deal, and I didn't see it coming.
You guys need to listen to Observer Live on Friday.
No thanks.
Because some dude called in, all bombastic and outrageous.
Do y'all think that John Cena is going to be the one that turns heel and joins The Rock as his champion?
No chance. And I shot him down. I laughed at him.
Wow.
I said it's not going to happen. John Cena's here to sell tickets and merch as a babyface for his last year. He ain't turning heel.
They need to make shirts for John Cena that just say, "Can you see me now?"
I got to apologize to old Dwayne. I thought that guy was out of his mind. He got me. This is awesome. I cannot wait to see where they go here. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Going to read some of these emails here in a moment. If you got Sabu memories, send them to me, Brian at WrestlingObserver.com, F4WOnline@gmail.com, Sabu in the subject line. And I do want to say one other thing first, because, people often say, like, what's your memory of such and such? What's your favorite such and such? I can't remember particular things. There's many Sabu moments and matches and et cetera. But overall, the thing that I will always remember about Sabu is that I always felt that he was, people always use the term, the last of a dying breed. And Sabu was one of the last of a dying breed in the sense that, as we talked about earlier, and we all know, wrestling is a work. And, you're going to watch Raw tonight. It's going to be a bunch of matches. Watched Backlash, a bunch of matches. You're going to watch Dynamite this week, bunch of matches. Everything's going to enjoy the show or whatever. But the thing with Sabu, and it actually traces back also to the original Sheik and many others in this business, is how many times you could watch a match with Sabu and feel like, oh my God, something really bad could happen in this match. And the thing with wrestling is we all know it's not real, but to be able to elicit the feeling in a person that, oh my God, something could happen here. Sometimes it's like you get really excited just to see if somebody's going to win a title or not. Like, oh man, I hope Sammy takes it tonight. But there's also that feeling where something could go really badly wrong in this match. And the thing with Sabu is, like, sometimes things really did go wrong. He broke his neck, I think twice. Severe back injury. The bicep, when he got his bicep sliced open and taped it back together. I mean, he would sometimes on purpose and sometimes not on purpose botch a spot, and you're like, oh my God. And because I think it was like with the Sheik, it's like you'd watch all these matches and then the Sheik would show up, and it was like, oh my God, calamity is about to ensue. And it was like that with Sabu. And part of this was you build an aura around the guy. He would come out with the mask early on in ECW and like the straitjacket gimmick, which actually I was told originally came from Dr. Luther in FMW. But, he'd put the barbed wire out there and the gimmicks, and there was always that feeling, you enjoy the show, and then all of a sudden here's the one where, oh my God, and that was Sabu's matches. Something, you always had that feeling of, you're kind of like a little bit worried that something really bad could happen in this match. And it was actually all the way up until his final match, because I was there. And, they put all that barbed wire around the ring, and they put those, tables outside, and I forget what they call it, the spider web or whatever of barbed wire. And man, you're just, he comes out for the match, and you just realize this guy's 60 years old. And it wasn't that long ago that, he was out there in a wheelchair. And I remember I talked to a friend of his before the show, and I was like, man, how's he doing? And they said, you know what? He's actually moving around really well. They actually said he may be moving better than Joey. I was like, really? And he got out there, and I cannot say he moved better than Joey, but I do know that he could move. And, that bell rang, and I can't sit here in good conscience and say, you know what? That was a good match, but I can tell you it was a memorable match. And it was one of those matches where, good or bad, you could not take your eyes off the ring because you didn't know what was going to happen. And, in fact, on 2 occasions in that match, I screamed. I was like, oh my God, that's it. The one where so the idea in a ring is, you hit the ropes and the ropes are going to spring back. It's not, you obviously do a little bit. If you don't want to bounce back, you can stop yourself, but they are going to spring you. And if you fall against them, they are going to stop you. They're going to hold you up. That was not the case with this barbed wire. And twice during this match, he kind of leaned into the barbed wire thinking it was going to hold him up like ropes, and it did not. And, like, he fell into the spider netting at one point. I was like, oh, my God, somebody get him out of there. And then the scary one was, they did a spot, and he was supposed to, like, kind of hit the barbed wire or whatever. And, again, he thought it was going to hold him up. He went through that barbed wire like a hot knife through butter. Or a knife through hot butter. They both work. But, man, he went through that thing, and he went head over heels. And, like, I was on the opposite side, so I couldn't see the landing. I thought, oh, my God, that's it. It's over. And they sent all these guys out there, and I'm in terror. I'm terrified. And he got up, and, man, he kept going, and he gave it his all. And, it was a spectacle. And in so many ways, it was a very fitting last match for Sabu. And very sad to hear of his passing. I didn't really know him, but I had communicated with him many times. Once, a couple of years ago, when there was that incident. It was like 2 years ago, and like he like collapsed at a signing or something, and there was concern that it might have been a stroke. And I messaged him then, like, "How you doing?" And he said, "Man, I'm fine." Made some comment about, getting hit in the head too many times, but he seemed like he was all right in the response. And he's one of many guys in this business where it's one of those deals where, hey, we should do a show someday. Yeah, we should do a show someday. And never did the show. And then he passed away. So, sucks. Very sad about that. And I want to wish the best to friends and family. And I'm going to read some of these and probably have other things that I remember as we go through. But this here is from Norm Connors, promoter of IWC, who actually promoted the last match that I ever had with Larry Sweeney, in fact. And he says, "In my early days in wrestling, I was able to see Sabu at the ECW arena on many occasions. I was blown away by his innovation. I was involved with the November 1, 1993 show in Steelton, Pennsylvania for ACW that had a Sabu Funk main event 2 weeks before the heavily promoted match at the ECW arena. Paul was not pleased, but neither Funk nor Sabu wanted the match changed. Crowd of over 1,000 that night saw the Bushwhackers, Greg Valentine, Nikolai Volkov in prelim matches. They didn't know what to make of these two workers some weren't familiar with. Within minutes, Funk and Sabu were tearing down the house. It is a memory I will never forget. With my company, IWC, Sabu appeared for me a few times. I remember the first show we worked together. He asked me what I wanted out of the match. Sabu was shocked when I only wanted him to use one table to put someone through. It was a 6-man tag. He joked, "You're paying me. Are you sure you want more?" I replied, "People are coming to see you put someone through a table." So one worked fine. He appreciated that. I felt less is more, and even though he joked about it, kept in touch with me after I retired in 2009. Just a few years ago, spent time with him on the Jericho cruise. I was able to introduce him to my handicapped nephew. He made him feel special, which I am forever grateful for. Really not sure if Sabu understands the way the business changed because of his efforts. I hope somewhere he does. And ironically, it was on Norm's show here, and I think 2007. It was a 4-way with me and Delirious and Larry Sweeney and oh my God, what was the fourth guy's name? It's gonna drive me nuts. I'll remember here in a second. But anyway, I think it was actually a surprise appearance at that show of the Sandman. Okay, so this was 2007, and Ruckus was the fourth guy. And I remember, I will never forget, Sandman was at this show, and I was like, oh my God, the Sandman. Because it was like 2007. I was like, I can't believe Sandman is here on this show. And fast forward to 2025. And by the way, in 2007, Sandman was not looking good. I was like, oh my God. Well, who would have known in 2025 I would be in attendance at Sabu's last match, and who should make a surprise appearance but Sandman, who actually looked better in 2025 than he did in 2007. So that was just wild. This person says, Sabu was in the main event. This is Sam, actually Vera. Sabu was in the main event of the first wrestling show I ever went to, an indie show at Amazura nightclub in Jamaica, Queens in 2006. He was the reason I bought a ticket. I was a 19-year-old, first getting into wrestling after watching some old ECW shows with a friend. He wrestled Rhino and accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, started a crowd riot of people throwing dozens of folding chairs into the ring, which resulted in the ring being filled up and approximately 2 feet deep. A carpet of folded chairs. Sabu and Rhino traded moves off the top rope, hitting Frankensteiners, pile drivers on the chairs. It was an experience that took an ember of interest in pro wrestling and poured a can of gasoline on it. So that is That is Vera's memory of Sabu from back in 2006. So I was going to do news and stuff, but we got more emails, so I'm going to keep going after the break. If you want to send them in, Bryan at WrestlingObserver.com. Put Sabu in the subject line, and we'll keep it up after the break. Observer Live. Just a quick note before this free video. If you click like and subscribe, I'd be very thankful. I think this show was like the best and worst of AEW.
The earliest story of this show was somebody almost died in every match. I thought MJF's head was going to fall off his body.
It looked like he put his own head into the mat as hard as he could.
Momo kicks Mercedes. Mercedes might have a bruised larynx.
I was certain Swerve had broken his neck.
Man, this dude landed right on his head.
Mariah May versus Toni Storm.
Good Lord.
Mariah gets her hands on a champagne bottle and smashes it right into Tony's crotch.
Some guy in the front row holds up a sign that goes, "For the sickos!"
It sure was.
Like, well, goddamn, this was for the sickos, all
As
right.
sick as you can get.
Yes.
I did not have glass to the vajayjay on my bingo card. For
I don't
this
know
year.
why not.
I
in
certainly
this
hope
field,
not.
You should have.
What kind of bingo are we playing over there? And the two big screens just read, "The End." This, in hindsight, absolutely should have ended the show.
Maybe it should have. However, I can't guarantee that this match was going to be this good with this much heat 5 hours into the live show.
Well, there's that.
Following all those matches we saw. Like,
true.
every time people say this should main event, it's like, are you sure you want that? Then we had Takeshi and Kenny. Another incredible match.
What is up with they have an announcer that wears a mask?
Oh, no. God, please, not this.
What
Anyway, the match.
What is that about?
I actually was fixing to give Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher the highest star rating on the show, but I would say that by the last 3-4 minutes, I was like, well, you did a little too much here. People are going to be mad, but it's true. We didn't need the Spanish fly off the top of the cage. This match would have been as good or better without it.
The penis first Styles clash into the tax.
That should be a finish.
That should be a career ender. It is tomb silent.
Oh, yeah, this crowd's dead.
They've seen every single goddamn thing two human beings can do to each other, and now men are grappling.
And Jason here goes, it's go away heat, Brian. He sucks. Listen, do you guys know what go away heat is?
Listen.
There were 11,000 people in this building. It's just like when people hated Jericho. There still is no evidence that he actually ran anybody off. They just didn't want him. Like, there's a difference. You want a different champion, but who is quitting AEW because Jon Moxley retained tonight?
Put the belt on Swerve immediately, as soon as possible. It could be me, it could be you, it could be Mark, anyone.
I don't want it.
Just, it's run its course.
All right. Golly, this Moxley has heat with these people. What did you think, Mark?
Oh, I'm coming for you now. Oh, he punched him in the diverticulitis. Pissed like a sprinkler.
Go
Back
out, and
forth,
we are going to do
back
what was
and
billed.
forth.
No, not like this.
There was more. There was.
It's not for me. Why do you like it
No,
so
Jason.
much? Are you guys on Tony's payroll?
In the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Nathan here. All right, so I used to live in the same neighborhood as Sabu in Lansing, Michigan. I never spoke with him, but I saw him a few times at the local convenience store. He always had an aura, but would carry around the smallest dog. Sounds about right. If you want to send memories, Bryan at WrestlingObserver.com, Sabu in the subject line. We got a bunch of them here. Chase says, my favorite memory of Sabu is a three-way dance between him, Shane Douglas, and Terry Funk at Hardcore Homecoming June of 2005. My friend had given me the DVD for my 13th birthday. The ropes were, of course, replaced with barbed wire. Mick Foley became the special guest referee about halfway into the match. The match was pure chaos, much like some of the best matches of his career. For the final spot of the match, Funk placed Sabu on a table, begins climbing a ladder. The ladder basically disintegrated, totally collapses while Funk is still climbing. He falls backwards onto Sabu, and they both crash through the table. Sabu hops up, hits the Arabian facebuster on the chair, gets the win. There was always a sense of that in a match. What disaster is going to occur in this particular match? And there were plenty of them. In fact, we were talking earlier about when he got his the barbed wire gashed open his bicep. And he had I forget what it was. It was like a ridiculously long, disgusting, and he just taped himself up to keep going. And they had to get these guys out of the barbed wire afterwards. And I think that was a match where Paul Heyman was like, ain't booking that one ever again. Number one, it can't be topped, and number two, I just can't do it in good conscience. So, yeah. This person here. Howdy, Brian. Don't have a name, so I'll just read it. In 1999, I went to an ECW show at a little venue in Staten Island, New York. I was 14 years old. I had never seen ECW before, just WWF and WCW. It was Sabu and Jerry Lynn versus the Impact Players. Sabu leapt from the top turnbuckle and landed in the seats right next to me. Forever changed what wrestling was for me and what pro wrestling should be. A memory I'll never forget. Thank you, Sabu. Well, we'll have Lance on tomorrow. We're going to be talking a lot about Sabu tomorrow. Lance on Twitter. I think I've got it right here. You think about Lance Storm and you think about Sabu. And he says it himself. I'm sitting on a flight crying at the news that Sabu has passed away. We were complete opposites both in and out of the ring. Yes, they were. We had almost nothing in common, but we were brothers, and I liked him a lot. Sabu had a good heart. There will never be another like him. Rest in peace, my friend. You will be missed and never forgotten. And he's got a picture of him and Jerry Lynn, Sabu, Bubba Ray. So we'll talk to Lance tomorrow and get more thoughts on Sabu. Mike here says, my favorite Sabu memory was being at Riot Fest here in Chicago in 2014. I was about to watch the band Cheap Trick perform. I was at the side of the stage. To my right was where the wrestling ring was set up. I've been looking for it all weekend, couldn't find it. I looked over, saw people in the ring, and I was like, is that Sabu? I walked over, and sure enough, it was Sabu having a match against some fat jobber. He did all of his spots, the skewers to the forehead, the chair, the tables, etc. Match might have lasted 5 minutes, all while Cheap Trick played Surrender. It was perhaps the most surreal experience I have ever had. That is from Mike. Josiah here says, Brian, never got to meet Sabu. I will never forget one of the first matches I ever saw him in. I had heard about him for years, even briefly saw him when ECW invaded Raw in the 90s, but I didn't see a match of his that I recall till I was able to find ECW Heatwave 1998 with Sabu, RVD versus Hayabusa, and Jinsei Shinzaki. I actually think that Sabu had Hayabusa's first match, if I recall correctly. While I may have seen some of his stuff in TNA at that point, it was still in the early 2000s, I was getting into ECW after it died. I was blown away by how fun that match was. That's Josiah from Canada. Same with Sabu, it's like, if he was going to have a match, he was going to give you a Sabu match. A table would be broken. And if the table didn't want to break, it was going to break eventually. And he was going to do all of his stuff, and he always did. Jose here says, 2 favorite Sabu memories not involving matches. The night Taz called Sabu out. The lights went out. When they came back, Sabu was across from Taz. Building went crazy. Now it sucks. The lights went out when they were about to touch, but that moment was great. Probably my all-time favorite were the RVD, Sabu, Bill Alfonso promos, where RVD would talk about himself, but Sabu's facial expressions said it all without saying a word. Very entertaining stuff. Yeah, Sabu also one of the rare guys who got fired in the ring. Wasn't there, went to Japan, missed an ECW booking. Heyman was furious, fired him in the ring. And not a lot of guys can say that happened to him. But it did. But it was Sabu. And so that was not the end. This person says, I was introduced to Sabu in 2001 by watching a DVD I bought from Suncoast. Oh, my God. I remember Suncoast. It's called ECW Extreme Evolution. One of the matches on there was Sabu versus Taz from Barely Legal. His offense was so different from the WWF style of wrestling that I have been watching since I started watching wrestling in 2000. Sabu was and will always be a legend to me. I always remember those kendo sticks, you know, table bumps and everything like that. I was never in a barbed wire match, never bumped on thumbtacks. I was always told that the thumbtacks aren't nearly as bad as you think as a fan. It's like, it's not a big deal at all. But the bad part is taking the thumbtacks out afterwards, is the way it's always been explained to me. But if you are not a wrestler, I think everybody kind of knows, you know, going through a table. It's better to go through a table than it is to just, like, take a bump on the ground, because a table breaks your fall, obviously. And so I did some table bumps when I was a wrestler. But the one thing that actually hurts worse, I think, than you think it does as a fan is the kendo sticks. Because, man, those kendo stick shots, absolutely brutal. I mean, they were brutal. We had a guy in Tim's promotion, it was Tim's manager, and he had a kendo stick. And, man, he hit you with that kendo stick. I would rather bump on thumbtacks. I would rather. But, you know, another Sabu story, because when I was, you know, 94, 95, when we were doing the YWF, I always, I was watching everything, and I'd seen Sabu do all these table spots. And sometimes it wouldn't just be one table, it would be stacks of tables. And so one day, having seen Sabu do some crazy spot with, like, tables stacked up on each other, I came up with this brilliant idea that I was going to go through a bunch of tables. But we didn't have tables. We were too cheap to actually buy tables to break, and we were smaller. So the idea that I came up with was this. We wrestled at a gymnastics facility, and they had these spotting blocks, which is just like a big square block. It's maybe 3 feet by 3 feet, and you would stand on there to spot people or whatever. And we had a whole bunch of those. So I had seen Sabu doing some, you know, going off the top through 2 tables or whatever, and I thought, I'm going to rip that off for the YWF tonight. So I came up with this idea, because we were too cheap to get tables, that we would get 3 big sheets of plywood, okay? Maybe an inch thick, just 3 sheets of plywood from Home Depot or whatever, and we were setting it up for the match. I set up 2 spotting blocks, put a sheet of plywood. Set up 2 more spotting blocks, put a piece of plywood. Set up 2 more, and put a piece of plywood. So this thing was probably, like, legitimately 9 or 10 feet high, and it had 3 layers of plywood, and then below that was the gymnastics floor. And so then we made another contraption out of the blocks so that my opponent could climb up to the top of this big tower, and he was going to pick me up, and he was going to power bomb me off this 9-foot tower through a 9-foot structure with 3 sheets of plywood. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. Like, I've gone through 1 sheet of plywood. It's easy, especially on a gymnastics floor. So I'm going to be going through 1, 2, 3, and land on the ground. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, that'll be easy. So, of course, we don't practice this because don't want to waste plywood. So we set up the contraption, you know, 10 feet tall, 3 sheets of plywood. We set up the other thing, the other set of spotting blocks. We're doing our little match or whatever. We start climbing up on this thing, and there's all these children around. It's like a sleepover or something like that. They're all screaming and going crazy. And so we get up to the top of this thing, and he's like, "You ready?" And I was like, "Let's do it, brother." And so he picks me up for this big power bomb, and he power bombs me whoosh, onto the top piece of plywood. And the good news is, jump, 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 boom. I go through exactly like I had envisioned in my mind. It was like the easiest bump in the world. I went through the first one, Went through the second one, went through the third one. I land on the ground, and I'm thinking, man, that was, and all of a sudden, bam, 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 all this plywood fell on my face because every piece of plywood fell down and then fell on top of me. It was like a Roadrunner cartoon when he falls off the cliff and then the boulder falls and lands on top of him. So anyway, don't try this at home. This person here says, one of my most vivid memories when I was younger was going to my buddy's house who had stolen cable, and we watched Barely Legal 97 with Sabu and Taz. Yes, there is video somewhere, but I haven't converted it. My mind was blown at the event, made me a fan forever, sometimes trying to emulate his crazy style with friends wrestling in the backyard. That's from Marcelo. Rest in peace, Sabu. You guys remember stealing cable? You kids nowadays don't know anything about this. Back in the day, there were channels on the television that you had to pay for. Pay television. And if you paid for it, they would unscramble it. But if it wasn't unscrambled, like you would the screen was just like a big, just scrambled. But you could like still hear the audio sort of. And so everybody, a lot of people, I don't know, I never did it, so I don't know how it was done, but you could buy like a special box, probably like mail order, and you could buy this box, and it would illegally unscramble all of the channels. I won't mention any names, but I had a friend who did that if he wants to come forward here in 2025 and admit to his crime. But that was, that's what people did back in the day, was they would steal cable to watch these pay-per-views and perhaps other stuff as well. So anyway, that's the last email there. But you're welcome to keep sending them in. Maybe we can read more on the show tomorrow with Lance. But I guess the last thing today in the meantime before the break, and what a segue this is, tonight is Raw. Sabu actually once worked that ECW revival for a year or so in WWE. But tonight, I'm sure we'll get a graphic. AJ Styles, Finn Balor, War Raiders versus American Made, Io and Rhea versus Roxanne and Julia, and CM Punk will appear. Back in a moment with more Observer Live. Just a quick note before this free video. If you click like and subscribe, I'd be very thankful. Let's do this unnecessary censorship.
Talk about your Psalms, talk about John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says I just your ass.
That was terrible. Horrible. They weren't the Heart Foundation. They weren't the British Bulldogs, okay? They're two geeks. And this celebration these guys did. Oh. I mean, they're like, Sean, give me brother. Yeah.
A place like that?
You two dorks. That's what you did. Why are you so excited?
Because they're awesome.
Okay. That was better than the first one.
It picked up at the end there.
Yes.
Unnecessary censorship.
He beat him. And 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 he beat him. I'm sweating.
Time to stop.
And he beat him.
Was this edited?
And then he beat him. And he beat him. So. I actually wore that shirt. It just says he beat him. He beat him. He beat him all the way down. Like
all the way down, you say?
I dropped her off at camp, and the camp counselor just looks at me. She goes, "He beat him and beat him." I was like, gag gift.
Brian, would you for me again this week? It's too hot to do much.
That's true. It is too hot to do much.
I guess I just better do it because it came up for me.
I'll wait.
It won't come up again. It's pretty short, so I'll just do it. Yeah. Now I gotta find it back.
Okay.
It isn't
Damn,
coming
I'm gonna
up.
kill you. How about you just it? Okay.
Ouch.
What else we got, Vinny? love that Granny licks her finger to turn the page. Lick that finger. There'll be an unnecessary censorship coming up. Lick that. Okay, let's see. Unnecessary censorship.
So Oro Ethan after the match and gets his ass just into the earth.
Vinny.
And Ethan is leaving, holding his all confident. And then Oro just comes back to life, and now he Ethan's ass.
Oro jumps him from behind.
Yep.
Then he beats his ass after cheap-shotting the guy. Haha. That was interesting. That's quite unnecessary. Instead of suffering through the YouTube chat, click like and subscribe. One more in here, Nathan. Just remember seeing Sabu wrestle at the reboot of Big Time Wrestling. Also, the show were Monty Brown and Jimmy Jacobs. Oh, John from Arkansas. My first exposure to him was my first tape trading experience. Getting a tape of him from New Japan clashing with Jushin Thunder Liger. Sabu versus Jushin Liger. Man, you're welcome to keep sending these in. Bryan at WrestlingObserver.com, Sabu in the subject line. If you're listening to this on delay or on podcasts, send me some stories, and maybe we'll read some more with Lance tomorrow. Dave is in Hawaii and is not doing Observer Radio tonight, but I plan to go solo, and we'll review Raw, any other news, and all that stuff, and then I'll be back here tomorrow with Lance, talking Sabu and all of the news. And then the Brian, Vinny, Granny, Craig, and Sean show on Tuesday night. There's a lot of stuff up there. Vinny and I, this past weekend. If you missed any of the news this weekend we didn't talk about today, if you sign up at WrestlingObserver.com or Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, we had 2 shows this weekend. Dave and I talking everything, and Vinny, Craig, and I with a very detailed rundown of the WWE Backlash pay-per-view. So check those out as well. F4WOnline.com/new for new subscribers, or F4WOnline.com/Apple for Apple Podcasts, which has a free trial, by the way. F4WOnline.com/Spotify, or F4WOnline.com/YouTube. The latter 3, all $9.99 a month for 84 podcasts on wrestling and the paranormal every single month. So check it out. And that's it, everybody. Thanks so much for listening here today. We'll talk to you next time. Wrestling Observer Live.